Well, welcome. My neck of the woods, it's still morning, so I will say good morning. Hi, Brenna. It's also morning in your neck of the woods because we live in the same woods. It's a very gray day here. Jenna, Wendy, hello, hello. Shell, oh my goodness. So fun to see all of your names popping up. This is what happens when you get a catchy title for your Facebook Live. Sorry, I have to laugh at myself. Hmm. So we'll see. As always, um, I I really love as much of this to be a conversation and a dialogue as possible. So if you have any shares from your life, either about how this has played out for you or any place that you disagree, or you have a question like, yeah, that seems true, but what about here? All of that is welcome. I love all the comments and having a little bit more of a dialogue. And I actually have this desire to, like, this has been something that's been in my mind for a while, this idea complaints are lazy desires. And I resisted doing a live about this because I was like, well, duh. Like that would be the shortest, most boring Facebook Live ever, because all I'm gonna say is like complaints are lazy desires, like end of story. And I'm kind of like, it's been said, yeah, like this just already it's already a dead horse, already been beaten. And but then in talking to people and in working with people, I've been realizing there is a little bit more to unpack. And the more that you can join the conversation, I think the more nuanced it can be. So, welcome, welcome, and thank you for being here. So, let's see. There's a couple things I want to say. And one is that I don't think complaints are bad. And it's one of the reasons that I put it this way, rather than maybe other ways that this could be said, is that I don't actually. First of all, I don't think complaints are bad. I don't even think complaining is like bad or that we shouldn't do it. But it helps sometimes to, or I believe, I guess I'll say in my own life, and what I see is I believe that it's most effective when we do it somewhat consciously. And I believe in conscious unconsciousness, sort of like, that you can have conscious complaints. So like I could go to a friend, I could be like, okay, can I just complain about something for 5 minutes? Like, I don't even want to take like I just want to complain about it. And there's a certain consciousness that comes with it, but there's real value. Sometimes we literally just need to move the energy in our body. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. And I just want to complain about this. That in kind of quote unquote conscious like communities or in the personal growth world, it can get all like contracted because it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to complain. Like I'm supposed to take responsibility, or I'm supposed to create something more powerful, or and we kind of pretzel ourselves around a complaint rather than just having it. So I just got nervous because Teo just joined. So anyway, for those of you who don't know, Teo is a colleague of mine, but also a teacher of mine. So I think that one of the ways that we can kind of like fuck ourselves around this is by pretzeling around like, oh, I'm not supposed to have a complaint, rather than going like, I have a complaint. Awesome. And so the reason I wrote it as complaints are lazy desires is that our willingness to actually recognize when we have a complaint, and then it's like almost like celebrate it, welcome it, and go like, oh, cool, I have a complaint. That means I want something. And this is like my consciousness or my unconsciousness or wherever I'm at in this moment. This is like my being's first pass at trying to let me know that I want something. And that's awesome. So kind of like with children, when they're, they do best when we encourage them rather than like shame them. And it doesn't mean, my children will be like, give me some olives. And I'll say, excuse me. And then they say, please, may I have some olives? So it doesn't mean that I just put up with their like bullshit demandy way of asking for olives, but it also doesn't mean like, oh, well, you know, since you didn't say please, you don't get any olives. Like, too bad for you. Wait till tomorrow and try again next time. So that's what I mean by, you know, if a complaint shows up in your system, in your world, like, I can't believe that person did that, or like, this thing is just messed up, or this, rather than go like, oh my God, you shouldn't feel that way, or have to shame it or fix it, is go like, oh wow, what is this complaint trying to show me? And to celebrate that it's your being's first pass at trying to let you know that you want something. So like, thank you. Thanks for letting me know you want something. Let's take a closer look. I'm going to pause here and just see a couple of comments. So Selena said, I agree, and frustration too. I see aspects of not wanting to feel vulnerable and not thinking I can have it, and or like don't have the power. Yes, so I'm going to check this other one and then I'll kind of come back in and see what weaves together with that. Bobby said, what an interesting concept. Are you saying that if, for example, I complain about difficulties in the context of composing my music, then it's really because I don't have enough desire to just go for it and face whatever barriers are here in the moment? No, I don't think I'm saying that. So I'll come to that in a moment. Thank you for asking. So first with Selena's, there is, yes. Oh, desire is really vulnerable. I could probably do a whole other Facebook Live around like the vulnerability of wanting and desire. So complaints are, that's one of the ways I would say complaints are lazy. One is that we often will just stop at the first pass. We're like, well, that's a problem. I guess I'll just stop there. And then if we're willing, you know, and again, it's not like the right way to do it or there's some obligation, but to go like, oh, so what is it that I want underneath the complaint? That also takes some effort. It's a little inconvenient. So that's the other part of not being lazy about it. But there is a part that's vulnerable. Even I think sometimes even to be with ourselves, and you touch on this, Selena, around if I think I can't have it, consciously or unconsciously, if I think I can't have the desire that's under the complaint, I am more likely to not admit the desire to myself, let alone to another person. So I'm trying to think of like an example. Well, for me, I get, you know, I mean, kids are like often my example here because they're very present in my life. They're loud. They take up a lot of space in my house, but I don't have any complaints about that. So, so I could complain about my son's Legos taking up a lot of space in my house. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I just complain about it. Sometimes I complain about it inside myself. Sometimes I complain about it to him. Sometimes I complain to other people. But it is a little lazy, right? If I just stop there. But, you know, like Brenna was on this live. She's a friend of mine. She also has a son. And so I can go to her and be like, oh my God, I'm just going to like complain about Trent's Legos. I can't even. And just be like, okay, whew, like I had to get that through my system. And now I can think creatively. I have a desire, and honestly, it's not even that I actually have a desire for like less Legos in the house, or my desire might not even be for the perfect Lego housing system. My desire is for a clean counter. Like in this moment, literally, I could have a little orgasm just thinking about what it would be like if my counter was completely clean. It's like, now I kind of think I can't have it. So I might just stop it like, oh, so annoying. I have a 9-year-old boy and my counter is going to be full of Legos for the next 10 years. But if I go like, wow, I really want a clean counter, you know, then it becomes an interesting, then I can get creative. But even just like getting down to that's a deeper desire. Actually, it's a deeper desire to have like an open counter than it is for Trent to pick up his Legos. Like, can you get how that's a step along the way? And I suddenly, I mean, even just, I didn't know I was going to talk about this, right? But like, literally, I get in touch with the desire for a clean counter, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And when I'm kind of like interested in something, I get creative. And that's true for most humans. So it's the willingness to kind of walk ourselves through these steps, even beyond. So the complaint is like too many fucking Legos in my house, you know, and then it might be like, ugh, like why can't he pick up after himself? Or like, ugh, we don't have a big enough house, or all these kinds of things. And it's like, oh, there's this part that's just like, just wants this space that might just be mine. But if I think I can't have it, I'm less inclined to admit that to myself. Once I admit it, though, then it becomes a creative solution. And then maybe it's something that I just want to take responsibility for. Like, okay, which I did. So a while back, like I was like, okay, so this is like something I'm complaining about chronically. This is it's like a practice that I would give to any of you watching. And then I want to check in on these comments that are coming through. But a practice, and this is why I opened with welcoming your complaints. Because as soon as you think that complaining is a problem, or that you shouldn't do it, or you have a judgment of yourself for complaining, or you are ashamed of your complaints, or you think you're not evolved if you have complaints, as soon as you do that, it's a human tendency to start like avoiding that part of yourself, or to shut it down, or to unconsciously avoid your complaints. And then what happens is you just shove and shove and shove and shove and shove and like do on top of them. But as soon as you welcome them, then you can go like, okay, so what are my chronic complaints? So this would be a practice. A practice would be, you know, take 5 minutes and just like write, you know, free write everything you want to complain about right now. All the complaints you have. And especially, you know, do a free write, like, what are my chronic complaints? What are my chronic complaints about my partner? What are my chronic complaints about my business? What are my chronic complaints about my children, about my house? Like, what do I just chronically complain about? Those are places where there's some important desire. Like if it was just a little thing, like I don't complain about traffic that often, even though I find it incredibly annoying and every once in a while it pops up. But because there's not like a deep desire. It doesn't impact my life. You know, there's all these reasons or whatever, but like there's little things that just come up as complaints. And then there's like the ones that, you know, like they come up every day or on a regular basis or several times a day or every time you see your partner, you know, like, there's a desire under there. And first you have to be willing to see what the complaints are. And then admit to yourself that you want something. So kind of walk those steps down. This is all before, so most of us just bring to the people in our lives, we just bring our complaints. And like I said, we can kind of create conscious container around that to like move the energy. But there is a place, again, with chronic complaints where there might be more energy, is to take this time on your own, you know, like do some free writing about it. Like, these are all the complaints I have. And then do some time like, okay, what is underneath that? Like if this Lego one for me is like walking it down. With my partner for a while, it was kind of like at the surface level was that we don't live together. And so then if we just deal with the surface, like if I just keep going like, we need to move in together, we need to move in together, we need to move in together, right? Like this is where, you know, I get the, like a chronic complaint, or like, it's just like I'm nagging. All I'm going to do is nag about, we need to move in together. But that's the surface level fix. And beneath that, there's layers. But when I go all the way down, it's like, oh, I want this feeling of our lives being more merged. And over the years, when I'm able to touch into that deeper desire, and then we meet each other in that deeper desire, and I'm able to come to him and like, how can we do this? How can we come up with a creative solution for our lives to be more merged? Is that all these creative solutions have emerged, and that there is this more merged life that we have, and we still don't live together. And we're still in the process of, there is a part of me that's like, okay, I do want to live closer, but maybe I don't even want to live in the same house. There's all these things, but this is what happens when you allow yourself to work through the complaint and to the desire, is that creative solutions emerge. So there is a piece that I want to put a pin in here, which is if you think you don't have the power. Usually what that is actually, it's actually the part of ourselves that wants to believe we don't have the power, because we can stay in complaint if we don't have the power. So that one's a tricky one, and maybe I'll have time to get to that at the end. But thank you for that comment, Selena. Now, I kind of want to check and see if Bobby wrote anything before I address, I think it's a he. But I do want to address this comment, because he asked, am I saying that if he's complaining about the difficulties in context of composing music, it's because he doesn't have enough desire? No. I would get, like, for me, I can't totally address this comment unless I know like a specific complaint. But if it's like, composing music is hard, like, is it that kind of a complaint? Or like, I don't have enough time, or I don't have a quiet space. So to me, that just means there's a desire. What I mean by lazy is to stay in the complaint is lazy, but to look at what is the specific complaint and then go deeper into, oh, I have a desire. Like, I think about Virginia Woolf and a room of her own, which was really this place of like, I mean, there's a much deeper and broader context for that, but I think about like a woman in that era who was a creative and a thinker and a writer. And at that time, like, I mean, we still have these desires, I mean, Jenna was on here earlier, and she's a creative and a writer and like, so that still exists in our era today. There's still this desire, like, some space. I just need some space to create. So the other thing that I want to just add here, and I actually do have another Facebook Live in me about this, but is that I think it's okay for things to be hard. And it's okay to complain about that to some extent, like, man, this is hard and I still want to do it. Or this is hard and I have some other complaint that needs to be addressed. But like, I wrote a post recently about, there are some things that are hard for me about my children being in school. I still want them in school. And there are some places that through that, like, some creative solutions came in. But I think it's also okay to go like, wow, this is hard. I would imagine composing music is hard sometimes, or that it takes effort, like it's like there's just some things to move through in a creative endeavor like that. And I think it's okay to say this is hard, and then it's okay to choose it anyway. But I think what I'm trying to get at here in responding to your comment is, I don't mean that if we're complaining, it means we're lazy and we just don't want it enough. I mean, stopping at complaint is lazy, and that, again, not as like a moral obligation, but if we actually want to get beyond complaint, that we have a responsibility to drop down into what is the deeper desire. And from that place, get creative. So I hope that addresses that comment a little bit. I'm curious what Jenna thought was so funny, because I don't always see these comments right when they come in. And then Jenna also said, love that. It sounds like using your desire to catalyze creative solutions. My experience is desire almost always does that. Like, when we're willing to actually have the desire, and this is why I even want to address this thing of like complaints just being kind of like lazy, because they keep us up here in like nitpicking the surface rather than going like, I want something. As soon as we say like, I want something, I swear, some people will say the universe hears it and wants to come and meet us. Like, Landmark used to talk about like our minds are meaning making machines, right? And so as soon as we ask sort of a better question, like, well, how can I have this thing? Or like, I want this thing, like, even in just inside ourselves, like, we're already going like, well, let's figure that out. Other people, I think, kind of like often come forward with like, I have a solution for that, which sometimes is annoying, but like, I didn't want to be fixed. I just wanted to complain. I'm quite bad at that, actually. I know that men get a bad rap for this, but like people say things to me and I'm like, well, I can fix that. And then I have to step back and be like, actually, did you just want to be heard? So, but I do think that there is this place, like when we're willing to get down to like, I want something, I want, space for this, or I want, a clean counter, or I want a certain kind of connection, or I want attention, or I want to spend more quiet time in nature. Like who, like what are these things that then the desire itself almost inherently starts to work in the realm of creative solution. That's my experience. And if it's not, I guess this is something I believe. So thank you for this question, Jenna. If it's not catalyzing creative solution, I would say two things about that. One is perhaps it's not the deepest desire. So again, I might have complaint right where I would say with my partner, like I do more work around the kids than you do because I live with the kids more often than he does. And then underneath that, is this desire like, oh, I want us to live together. But that wasn't really the deepest desire. So there were some creative solutions, but there was also some like crunchiness. And sometimes that's just logistical solutions, right? And stuff. And then it got down to this deeper desire, which is like, oh, I want this feeling of our lives being more merged. So that's the first thing that I would say is even asking, getting curious and being like, well, is that the deepest desire? A lot of times, this is where I work with women, for instance, in the No Man Diet or in different ways in Fierce Grace, but women will say like, I want a partner. And it's not that that's not true, but that's up here. Oftentimes what they mean is like, well, I don't want to feel lonely, or I want someone to share my life with, or, I want this, there's these feelings that they want to feel that they imagine if they had a partner, they would feel. And number one, that's not always true. And we know that, but we all do this around something. I'm not picking on women here and partnership, right? We all do this. Like, for men, it's like, I want to find my purpose, or, I want a better job. I want to make more, like I want to raise. And it's kind of like, it's just at this level. It's not untrue, but usually that's because I want to feel a certain way, or I want to be able to provide in a certain way, which would make me feel a certain way, or I want to be able to, buy these things, which I think will make me feel a certain way. So usually they're deeper than this. And then the other I would say is that there is a beauty when we get into the deeper desires. There is that first place, right, where it's vulnerable to admit to ourselves. But there's another place then in being willing to share that, right? Not from the place of complaint, but from like, oh, I'm like wanting something. Hey, do you have any ideas about how we could kind of like work with this desire I have? So there's a vulnerable place in which we don't have to come up with all the creative solutions on our own. And this has actually happened with my son and Legos. I'll be like, Trent, I'm stumped. Like, I really need some space on the counter. What are we going to do? And so there is, and then engaging somebody else to catalyze creative solutions as well, and not needing to do it alone. But it's really different to come at it from the level of complaint and then be like, why aren't they helping me? Or from like, gosh, like, I really want something here, and can you help me? I will read this thing that you wrote about the erotics of blame another time, Jenna. I'm sure it's amazing. Brenna said, I'm wondering, is complaining asking someone else to come up with the creative solutions without them really knowing oh God, that's such a great, I think it kind of is. There is this sense of like, fix this, which is a certain, like, and I think especially because you added that last line, without letting them know your deep desire. So it's kind of a lack of allowing for the vulnerability of like, I really would like some help with this. Sometimes the deep desire, we have to let go of exactly how it's going to be fulfilled. And I don't think that we always, I'm not, again, I want to say this isn't like a moral imperative. Like, you're a better person if you just say like, I want love and I let go of complete attachment to how it shows up in my life. Like sometimes we're like, okay, there's like something that I know that I want and I'm working towards it. And that's one thing. And then there's another area, which is like, there's a deep desire to feel a certain way. And then there's a vulnerability in saying, can you help me with this? And I'm going to let go a little bit of saying like, and I need you to do it like this, 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 and this. And that's how I will know that this is being met, which doesn't really allow somebody to help us. That's a different kind of a request, which is also valid, right? Like, I really want this fence built and I really want it to look like this. Are you willing to help me? Like, that's a very clear request. But there's another place in looking at what are deeper desires. So I think that's a great question, and I would say yes. The other thing, and this goes with what Selena was saying, which is that there can be a safety in a certain kind of helplessness. And it's more like, so John and I will sometimes talk about like sacred helplessness, and this is more like selfish helplessness. Like complaining is like selfish helplessness. It's like, I don't know what to do and I'm lost and everything happens to me and I have no control over it and it's all kind of going wrong and fix it, right? But without even saying that, it's just like listing all the things that are a problem and why you have no control over them. And so I think what you're saying is quite right on and very deep. Okay. I'm going to pause for a minute because I hit the bottom of the comments and I also just talked a lot. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up in a minute. So if there are other shares or other questions, go ahead and bring them and I'll meet as many as I can. But what I love about what some of these comments were bringing, and what I really want to make sure that I kind of circle back around to. So complaint, I would say, is often heard as a dirty word. So is lazy. And I think I just want to say, in this context, I want to say they're not dirty words. But there's something in acknowledging them more as like objective rather than like shameful, dirty words that can be freeing. It's like, oh, am I willing in this moment, am I willing to do the deeper work of finding the deeper desire? Or do I need to just be like a little bit lazy and complain for a few minutes? But at the very least, acknowledging that even if I can't get to it right now, if I'm either unwilling or incapable for whatever reason, I bet there's a desire under here. And I just don't know what it is yet. And that's okay. So I'm going to pay attention to this complaint, right? I'm going to go like, gosh, man, there's something in this that keeps coming up. So there is clearly a desire here for me. And personally, I'm a fan. I mean, I already said as a practice, right, like doing a free write about it, and that willingness to bring consciousness and awareness to something without making it true. Like, just because I wrote all these complaints down doesn't mean they're true, but I want to bring some consciousness and attention to them. And the other part being, I lost it. So yeah, without turning away from the complaint, but without making it true. And then also allowing, sometimes just letting like the unconscious being like, okay, complaint, like I see you. I don't know how to get underneath you yet, but I'm gonna let my unconscious work on this. Like maybe take it into my dream state, do this writing, like just kind of let it percolate and see what creative, like what might come from that, what I might learn about myself. Other places would be to take things to trusted friends and say like, I've noticed I have a chronic complaint here. It really seems like I'm helpless, but I'm guessing that there's a desire I have. Can you help me? Like these are ways to play with this and not make ourselves wrong for having complaints, not make ourselves wrong for if we can't find the desire. And I do think that that early comment was, there's some real value in there, which is acknowledging in the process that it can be very tender to admit that we have desires. So something I didn't say at the beginning, but that I'll just wrap as context around this here towards the end, is I believe that we live in a culture that encourages, what's the word, like self-sufficiency to an extreme. And acknowledging that I have wants and desires and needs automatically flies in the face of the cultural assumption that you're a better person if you're self-sufficient. I don't believe that any of us are self-sufficient. So, which is probably why it didn't even occur to me to say this until the end. Like that whole subtext is bullshit. I call bullshit. And I want to acknowledge that even to do this work will go against that. And that can be scary and it can be vulnerable. So last comment here. Jenna said, I love your liberating these words. Can we allow laziness and complaining to lead the way? I noticed I got this. I was like, well, I don't know if we can let laziness lead the way. But I do think that an ownership, like, okay, I'm not yet willing, or I still want to be lazy about this right now. That it can be, at least to take it out of the realm of shame and shadow. And maybe there's something for me, because I'm like, well, that's just you and me, Jen. I think we both do 1 on the Enneagram. So, laziness is like paramount to, it's one of the deadly sins. It is one of the deadly sins. Sloth. I have a meme, actually. Maybe I'll post it in the comments here. That's a sloth, and it's like this really cute little sloth, and it says, I'm not a deadly sin. So what I do love about that, and then I will close here, is that it does take, some of these things can take time. And our need for the fast answer and the fast fix can cause like our tender desires to run, or it can cause the parts of us that are a little bit more in the shadow to like right back to the shadow. And so that willingness to just sit with something with some awareness, but it's like the peripheral awareness that, if you saw a doe and a fawn out of the corner of your eye, if you just turned really fast, they would be gone. But if you just let them be there, they might come a little bit more into the forefront. And that does take patience. So thank you for that, Jenna. All right. Thank you all for being with me. And thank you for the shares and the conversations. And I love you. Ciao.